Well, if you drive north on Main Street, you go past Logan, you kind of go under that overpass there. It's hard to ignore. Burnt out buildings, vacant buildings. It's a problem. And that's what we're going to talk about today and what people are trying to do to change that. That's today on This is Manitoba. I'm Corey Funk in for Marcy Marcusa. And there's a growing concern about the high number of fires in the North End, many of them in vacant buildings, and some even historic, like the Sutherland Hotel, which burned down earlier this year. For a group of Winnipeggers, arson prevention goes beyond just stopping fires. Tonight, actually, well, it is Tuesday here that we're recording, a group called North End History will be hosting its monthly general meeting. And at the top of the agenda is arson prevention. Michael Redhead Champagne is one of the organizers. He's also a longtime community activist. And he spoke with CBC's Margaux, and he says the fight to stop fires is also a fight to preserve our city's history.
It's a pleasure to have Michael with us this morning. Good morning.
Thanks so much for having me and for having this important conversation.
Nice of you to be here. How bad would you say the arson situation is in the North End right now?
I mean, it's pretty rough. We're having a rough time right now in the North End of Winnipeg. We are regularly dealing with older buildings that are going up in flames, and it's just feels constant. And it's happening on our bigger streets as well, so Selkirk Avenue, Main Street. Mm-hmm. And when we see these things happening, it really impacts the whole neighborhood, not only because there's a missing building and there has been arson, but because folks maybe have been hurt in that situation, and building owners are now reeling, and the community has one less service.
So it really touches everyone.
It does. It really does. And especially in situations that we've seen recently, like you mentioned the Sutherland, we have historic building stock in Winnipeg and historic buildings that contain stories. North End History wants to celebrate people, places, artifacts, and stories of North Enders. And in Winnipeg and in the North End, we have a North End spirit. And that North End spirit means we stand up and we work together to try our best to confront the challenges that we're facing, even when they seem impossible.
And how challenging is that when some of those holders of the stories are disappearing?
It's very, very challenging. And that's part of why the North End History Group is really working to include younger people in the story so that we can do some of that relationship building and hearing of stories of the older generations, that they can be preserved in a good way. But that's partially why we want to do this arson prevention. So many stories are contained within our built environment, and there are so many iconic buildings that we have in the North End of Winnipeg. When we shift maybe from a perspective of what those historic buildings could be, we look in the Exchange District and we see very, very great opportunities for economic development when it comes to filming sets and locations. And I feel like the North End of Winnipeg has just the right amount of older building stock that we could also serve as a movie location if only we were able to, zhuzh up our buildings and make those historic buildings a little bit nicer and shinier. We might be able to also be a place where we have those economic development opportunities where we can create movies and, like we started with, tell stories.
Do you have a sense that you've been overlooked somewhat in that regard when you talk about the Exchange and what they've done there and what you see as potential in the North End?
Well, I think the North End tends to stand up and speak out when we feel like we need to. And, sometimes that's because we feel overlooked, and sometimes it feels like because we got a problem that we're working on. And so I think in this situation, it's us identifying that the residents of the neighborhood and the businesses and the organizations are really passionate about making sure we have a safe community and we take good care of it. But we're afraid right now with all of these fires that are happening that some of that is at risk. And so really what we're hoping to do tonight at the North End History General Meeting, which is at 6 o'clock at Merchants Corner, which is, again, a historic building that has been new life has been breathed into it on Selkirk Avenue. Inside of that building, we'll be talking about arson prevention, and we'll be identifying some of those problem areas, and then identifying who are some of the helpers and the main people that we need to bring together to address this challenge. And then the third thing we're going to do is actually bring those folks together so we can make a plan and measure it, because there's no point in just having pretty words. We actually have to have a plan and then over time measure our progress and make necessary adjustments as possible. So we don't have a plan yet, but we are going to make a real good one. I trust the North End.
And it sounds like this is an issue that we've certainly heard about for years, I think, right? But now it's gotten to the point where you really feel serious action needs to be taken.
We do, and there are many organizations in the neighborhood like William White Neighborhoods Association, North End Community Renewal Corporation, and others that are doing fantastic work in arson prevention. So we feel like if we can put all of those folks together, we can make a better plan and we can actually improve the situation if we do it together.
What are you hearing from people in the neighborhood about the current state?
I think a lot of folks are worried. People are really, really concerned. And not only are they worried about the arson and the damage that it has on the building and our overall historical culture as a neighborhood, folks are worried about the people that are seeking shelter inside of those empty buildings. And they're worried about people struggling with homelessness. And they're worried about our relatives that are out there sleeping on the street. And so North Enders aren't just wanting to displace folks that are having a hard time, that are inside of some of these buildings that burn down. We want to have a comprehensive solution that takes care of our relatives that are struggling with homelessness or mental health challenges that maybe are a part of these fires in some kind of way, but also engage those building owners and organizations so that we can make the building safe and provide whatever supports and services we need for those folks that are struggling, as well as the business owners and building owners to breathe new life into these buildings so that we can celebrate the history and the people and the stories of Winnipeg's North End.
How much help do you think you need, Michael, from governments, from outside agencies?
I think we need so much help. Part of why I'm here today is because anybody listening who thinks that they're in a position to help us, we are casting a wide net. We don't know what the answer is, but we know what the question is. The question is, how can we prevent arson in the North End of Winnipeg? And if you feel like you have a piece of the answer, we need your help tonight at 6 o'clock at Merchants Corner Inc. with North End History.
Why do you think the problem's so bad now?
That's a great question. And I think that's another one of the topics we're going to broach this evening. We're going to chat with folks and ask that very question about what do they see as the reasons behind some of these fires? What do they see as some of the possible sources of these consistent fires? And if we can identify some of those sources, that's obviously where we want to then focus our energy in trying to prevent these things from happening too.
Great talking with you. Thanks for coming in.
Thank you so much.
That's Michael Redhead Champagne. He's an organizer with North End History. He was speaking with CBC's Margaux Watt. Well, let's take you from the North End now and head over to the Exchange District, where there is a brewery that's a little bit worried about these tariffs. And it's not because of the beer they make, because the beer is made here in Canada, but it's the cans that they come in, and particularly the aluminum that they're made out of. U.S. President Donald Trump says he will go ahead with a 25% tariff on most imports from Canada starting next week, so early March 4th. Canadian businesses have been bracing for high costs associated with U.S. tariffs. Trump's also threatened an additional 25% tariff on steel, auto parts, aluminum. And with those tariffs set to take place, particularly those ones on aluminum on March 12th, so they got a couple more weeks to prepare. Breweries that use aluminum cans to package their beer products are taking a closer look at their numbers. CBC's Alana Cole actually checked in with Little Brown Jug Brewing Company here in Winnipeg, and she spoke with its founder, Kevin Selch, about how the tariffs could impact his business.
We are canning this morning. We're canning Winnipeg's iconic 1919 Belgian Pale Ale. All of the tall cans go into a big elevator over there where they're lifted up. The cans come in a stack that's almost 9 feet high. They get lifted up. An arm sweeps them onto a 4-wide conveyor. In the wintertime, it's our slower season, so we're canning a few times a week. But in the summertime, we could be canning 4 days a week. We can empty an 8,000-liter tank in a matter of probably 5 hours.
Okay, so these here are 16-ounce cans.
Yeah.
That's what you use. They're brought in from the U.S.
Yes, all 16-ounce cans, aluminum cans, are brought in from the U.S.
Why can't you get them in Canada or manufactured in Canada?
Nobody makes them in Canada. They do make the smaller cans, but the rolled aluminum actually comes from the United States as well, even for the smaller cans.
So how many of these cans would you say go through this brewery almost in a year? Like how many cans are we talking about? When we think about tariffs,
Yeah, it could be about 1.3 million cans, I would think, this next year.
so even a few cents makes a difference.
Yeah, I mean, in manufacturing, it's all about the cents. It's all about the efficiencies. Margins are really, really tight. So a 25-cent tariff could raise the price 5-6 cents, but that's across billions of cans in Canada. We go through over 1 million cans here at Little Brown Jug, so 5 cents does hit our bottom line. The other thing we're worried about is the countervailing tariffs. So when it was proposed to put on the paperboard tariffs, that also would impact us through the cardboard and trays and other things that we use here in the brewery. The cardboard comes from either Canada or the US, but when Trump had proposed the original tariffs, one of the countervailing tariffs that Canada was going to impose as a retaliatory measure was going to be on paperboard. So if the raw material for the paperboard was coming in from the United States, we'd expect to be impacted from that as well. In Canada, we make a lot of aluminum. A lot of it goes to the United States. So even though some 12-ounce cans get made in Canada, we don't have a way of rolling aluminum in Canada. So it all gets rolled in the United States and then shipped back to Canada for those assemblies of the smaller cans.
Why the 16-ounce cans versus the 12-ounce cans that are manufactured here?
Packaging smaller, there's more waste, there's more expense. In some ways, by going to a smaller can, even though you save that little bit of aluminum, there wouldn't be that much saving passed on to the customer because it's such a small amount. But it is something we're looking at, and it's something we would definitely consider in the future.
So when you think about craft breweries like yours, I mean, what happens if there's a disruption in terms of the price and the price of aluminum cans? Does that get passed on to the consumer? Does that eat into your profits? What happens to the business?
As a small brewery, we're price takers in terms of what the overall price for beer is in the market based on taxes and inputs. I think the big players like Molson and Coors and Labatt have a lot more market power in terms of how they probably avoid that, but they'll probably be impacted as well. They also have the ability to do intra-firm pricing, so I don't know what kind of tools they have in their toolbox to be able to manage that. But certainly as a small brewery, we try to get the best price we can, but we essentially are price takers. We don't have the market share to shape price from our suppliers. We order cans on such a large scale just to get those down to a price that we can sell en masse at over 1 million cans a year. But in a couple months, we're going to have a warehouse at Centerport, which will allow us to do a lot of that in-house. So we will have a little bit of extra capacity to store cans, a little bit more control, but any savings you're going to get by stockpiling cans, you're going to end up paying for in storage fees. If you look behind us, there's a lot of stainless steel and aluminum. And fortunately, we've purchased a lot of this already. We've invested in our capital equipment, but if we were to continue to invest and want to grow our business, that would be really difficult if the capital equipment was being hit with a 25% tariff. That would almost be impossible to be importing some of these pieces of equipment. Around the growth of the business, we started with just 2 tanks. We've kind of bootstrapped it. We kind of grew and bought more equipment, and so we still have plans this year to continue to grow, and those will be put on hold for sure. We are also looking at expanding into maybe Minnesota and Wisconsin. That's definitely on hold for now. So we want to look at growing our business across Canada if possible.
Anything that you would like to see happen when it comes to provincial or federal governments if these tariffs do come into place next month?
Yeah, I think there's 2 things. I mean, one, we have to strengthen Canada. This is a huge opportunity to take down interprovincial trade barriers and to look at strengthening supply chains within Canada and what can be done around that. For instance, we sell a lot of beer here in Manitoba, and all of our customers go to the cottage country in Kenora, and many of them take our beer across to Kenora, to the Lake Country, and I'm really grateful for that. But we can't sell our beer easily and readily in Ontario. So I'd like to see that change so we can start expanding our market here.
What about bottles? Are they an option?
The craft brewing industry moved away from bottles a long time ago, and so has the domestic producers as well. The bottles are heavy. They require a huge space to clean and run the bottling line. They break. It's just an inferior product. But also aluminum is an incredible metal. Like 99.99% of it can be fully recycled, melted down, formed into another can or another piece of metal. It doesn't lose any of its properties. So I think everybody's kind of moved to aluminum. It would take a huge adjustment to go back to bottles for anyone.
Well, that was CBC's Alana Cole speaking with Kevin Selch of Little Brown Jug Brewing Company. And now we want to keep talking about breweries, brew pubs, because there's actually something pretty cool happening in Gimli right now at a brew pub there. If you go to Interlake Brewing Company and ask to be seated at the patio, you might be surprised by what you see. It's February, and they're making the most of winter. Typically, the rooftop patio kind of looks like your average patio, a winter patio, if you will. But over the weekend, the owners actually decided to give it a bit of a makeover. Now, where there was chairs and tables, there's actually a curling rink there. They actually straight up put ice on this roof of this brew pub in Gimli. Graham McLean is one of the owners, and he also created the rink. He spoke with CBC's Margaux Watt.
Good morning, Graham.
Morning.
Could you describe what the patio looks like right now?
Sure, yeah. So we adapted it to the winter to make it a little more fun and interesting for everybody. We've added a short curling rink that goes one direction and a bunch of different ice bars so people can come up and hang out and have a drink and enjoy the weather.
Very cool. When you talk about it being short, what is the size of it?
It's only about 30 feet long.
So how concerned were you about the weight of this thing on the roof?
We were pretty careful about that. When we renovated this building about a year and a half ago, we did a lot of development to help the structural side of things. So now that we're developing a rink on the roof, we're making sure to not lay on the ice too thick.
Right, literally.
Yeah.
when you first told people you were going to build a curling rink on top of the place, what was the reaction?
A lot of people were really excited about the idea. I think in general it's not extremely motivating to go outside and do outdoor sports in the middle of February like this. But, luckily we had some nice weather this past week, and this weekend we got some good use out of it.
So tell me what it was like over the weekend.
We had a bunch of different sorts of people pop in and throw a few jugs and give it a try. I think, depending on how much damage this nice weather does to it in this coming week, I think we'll keep it going and get more and more people interested.
How long did it take to create the rink?
Not too long. It took, I guess, a couple of weeks, a few days here and there, letting it freeze and building it up and all that stuff. And, the snow came pretty quick, so we were able to build all the ice bars and things fairly quickly.
So how much maintenance will there be to keep it in shape, especially with the weather changing so much here?
Yeah, that's kind of a, we'll see what happens sort of situation. I think, we're closed on Mondays and Tuesdays, and that's when this warm weather has really struck us out here. So I'm going to go take a look at it tomorrow and see the damage and see what needs to be done. But, it all, like I said, depends on how much more snow is coming and all that. And, we'll do what we can to keep it going.
I have a good friend who was just out in Gimli ice fishing and just couldn't stop talking about how beautiful it was, what a great winter experience, which many of us have had the pleasure of enjoying over the years here. How does this tie into Gimli's place in the winter landscape?
So our place is right across the street from the lake. Great view of all the fishing shacks out there and snowmobile trails and all that stuff. So you're definitely, right in the main sort of harbor area there where there's a lot of activity on nice days. And, as you know, probably Gimli curling is a big deal in Gimli. So I think, we're trying to give people as many reasons as we can to get them outside and coming together as a community in the winter and get them to have some fun.
Well, let me know when the first rooftop tournament is happening, okay?
Sounds good.
Thanks, Graham.
Graham McLean is the owner of Interlake Brewing Company in Gimli. Well, there you go. We did a bit of a tour. We went from the North End, the Exchange, up to Gimli, and now I want a beer. I'm recording this at 9:30 in the morning, so I think I'm going to wait a little bit, but I'll probably have a bit of a nap first. This is Manitoba. I'm Corey Funk, filling in for Marcy Marcusa. That's a wrap. Make sure to follow and share if you like the show, and we'll be back again tomorrow. Have a good one.